Many plants we eat as vegetables, others have medicinal uses. But there are rare and special plants that generate visions or hallucinations if they are eaten or ingested. In our culture, we associate such experiences with illegal drugs, but there are many cultures for whom these plants are seen as sacred and regarded as a key to another mystical world. As an archaeologist and anthropologist, over the past 20 years I have become fascinated by these plants and their cultural importance, and have been engaged in a quest to uncover their secrets. Salvia divinorum is thought by some to contain the most powerful natural hallucinogen known to man. Yet the effect of the actual plant is strange and elusive, and hardly anything is known about it in the West. Despite the dangers of taking any hallucinogen, to uncover the secrets of this sacred plant, once again a team of specialists was gathered. The effects of salvia have never been recorded scientifically, and over the next few days the team would help carry out a series of unique scientific experiments. Volunteers were to take a strictly controlled dose, and we would record the outcome.
I felt actually as if somebody had said something extremely funny, or as if there was something extremely funny, but I wasn't quite sure what that was.
I realized that the reflectors were connected to the reality of the kind of individuals that I knew and how all the people made up my life.
We've known about Central and South American cacti, such as peyote or San Pedro, for a long time. But until 20 years ago, we had no knowledge at all about Salvia divinorum. Used by the Mazatec Indians, a small and remote tribe in Central America, it was discovered in the 1950s. And it's only in the last decade that the active ingredient has been identified. Might the experiment enable us better to understand how salvia has become so important to the Mazatecs? And might it also cast light on salvia's mind-altering effects, or identify previously unknown toxic effects? Ah, Françoise, hello.
Hello, Andrew.
Great, very nice you could make it.
Well, I'm very happy to be here.
Françoise Friedman was my first guest. An anthropologist at Cambridge University, she had made a special study of the use of salvia in Native American culture. And you've spent a lot of time in Mexico.
I've spent some time in Mexico, more time in South America, but I find the Mazatec and all the people of Oaxaca really interesting anyway.
Ah, good. Here's Tim. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Tim Kendall was the next to arrive. A consultant psychiatrist and director for the Center for Psychotherapeutic Studies, he brought a very different expertise to the team.
You think it's very different to other hallucinogenics?
Yes, yes.
My experience is working with people who are hallucinated usually from emotional causes. I'm very, very interested in how this might appear and work with people who take salvia.
The final guest was John Robbins, a pharmacologist from King's College in London. I hoped he might help us to understand how salvia acted on the brain.
It's interesting that you say you chew the leaves. I mean, that must be a very slow way of getting it into the body as opposed to smoking.
Yes, I've read somewhere actually in one of the papers that the action takes place through the saliva.
Oh, right,
so it's better actually not to swallow. You don't swallow at all. But I was actually anxious to hear your response to this paper.
Once the guests were assembled, I gave a brief guide to salvia's remarkable history. The plant we're considering today grows in a very restricted area of Central America, in the province of Mexico called Oaxaca. It's a mountainous and very rugged area, hard to move around in even today, and it's inhabited by the Mazatec Indians. Living in this fairly remote region, they've kept many of the practices of their traditional culture. One of them is this plant, Salvia divinorum. It belongs to the same family as common garden mint, and yet its effects are quite different. It's very rare and native only to a small part of Mexico, where it's considered sacred. The name means the diviner's sage, and it's used in religious ceremonies, both for curing illness and also to gain visions. And these can be used either to secure supernatural help, or even visions of where some lost object can be located. The use of this plant may well go back to the Aztecs, who ruled Central America before the arrival of the Europeans. Today, the plant plays an important part in the faith of the Mazatec Indians by inducing visions of the Virgin Mary, who's considered to be the patroness of this plant, and indeed it's called Herba Maria Pastora, the herb of Mary the Shepherdess. Well, this is clearly a most intriguing plant, and the question is really how it's come to have this special status and how it's to be seen as actually sacred, and the way in which it seems to give access to these hidden stores of knowledge and memories. Françoise, you've studied the Mazatec Indians and the role that this plant plays in it. What do you think?
I think Salvia is a very unique plant which has played quite a unique role, and I think we should be prepared to look into what the indigenous people themselves say about it. The Mazatec approached the plant as a learning aid to become a shaman and to get insights about the creation of the world and the cosmos. And as an anthropologist, I consider it my role to actually convey their interpretation of how the plant gives access to hidden knowledge about healing, about hidden places, and about the properties that it can give access to. And we have here a recording which was made of Maria Sabina, who was one of the most famous women healers among the Mazatec, and this is a recording of her chanting. She explains how the plant gives access to medicine and medical knowledge in her own culture.
Tim, you come to this question of hallucinations from the point of view of someone who is studying mental illness. What do you think about these descriptions?
What I think is interesting is that whatever the cause of hallucinations, they are subject to psychological explanations, that they have relevance to the person concerned. And I suppose that's what, as a psychiatrist, I can bring to bear.
Yes. John, this plant seems to have very interesting properties for the pharmacologist. What do you feel may lie behind its special cultural role?
Well, I think as a pharmacologist, I'm interested in how compounds, and including drugs, interact with the brain very physically. Here I've got a nice three-dimensional picture of the one of the active compounds, and probably the major one, Salvinorin A. It doesn't act on the outside of cells like other hallucinogenic compounds. And indeed, other chemical substances like this, which is known as a diterpene, seem to act within cells. And this may explain, possibly, its mechanism of action being slightly different from the classical run-of-the-mill hallucinogens. So it may be a new substance or a new mechanism of action for this substance, and that would be interesting pharmacologically and may lead to a greater understanding of the brain in the long term.
It was time to meet our first and very special volunteer. Daniel Siebert had flown in from the west coast of America to be with us. Although not an academic or a chemist, he successfully isolated Salvinorin A and was the first person to show that this was the active chemical compound in salvia, publishing his results in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology. Well, we're very lucky to have Daniel Siebert here, and I suppose the question that we're all really wanting to know is what it actually feels like to take this plant, what sort of experiences it gives rise to.
Well, I've had quite a range of experiences with the plant, and In different forms, done in the traditional manner of chewing the leaves, as well as experimenting with other methods of ingestion.